Cycle Talk TV is brought to you by Ducati, Kawasaki, KTM, Harley-Davidson, On Two Wheels Motorsports, Polaris, Triumph and Victory.
Welcome to Cycle Talk TV. In this episode we check out Triumph's new Learn the Legal Street Triple 660. Amazing motorcycle, this one right here. We ride an old 1950 AJS Model 18S 500cc air-cooled single, great old bike. We look at Evans waterless coolant and see what they can do for your motorcycle. We've got the usual product pick of the week, but first we're going to look at the Polaris RZR XP1000 side-by-side fun machine.
There's nothing quite like getting out into the bush with a couple of mates on ATVs or motorbikes. But when you want to take along a friend and they mightn't be able to ride, you're going to need something a bit more extreme. That's where the RZR comes in. The RZR takes extreme to new levels. It's got a 999cc twin-cylinder engine producing over 100 horsepower. It gets from 0 to 80 in 5.3 seconds. The suspension travel, it's fantastic. It's over 450 millimeters and it's fully adjustable, 16 clicks, front and rear. So we can see the RZR, it's got the looks like something out of Mad Max or looks like a jet hopper dune buggy. But Polaris engineers, they really blurred the lines between that and the features of a car. It comes with fully fitted doors, windshield, optional roof, power steering. It's the sort of thing that gives you the adrenaline rush of a dirt bike with the features of a car. Taking a look at the rear of the RZR, it's got very aggressive styling. It looks fast, just sitting here doing nothing. There's massive amount of play here and travel for the rear suspension, which is the 2.5-inch Walker Evans anti-bottoming needle shocks. You've got 29-inch Maxxis Bighorn tyres here to cushion you on that rough terrain. And then we've got the 999cc twin-cylinder engine, over 100 horsepower, 0 to 80 in 5.3 seconds. Well, there's an afternoon on the Polaris RZR. Man, this thing is crazy. It's like an angry dog. When you kick it, it just gets even more angry. This thing is out of control. It really deserves some respect. You can imagine the power of your favorite road bike put in a package that can just go on any road. The first time I sampled one of these was around these very grounds with rally champion Cody Crocker. I'm sure he's on YouTube somewhere. Look it up. What Cody can do in one of these is just mind-blowing. But even to a mere mortal, they are just so much fun. They are massive power, great handling. Everything's put together in that typical Polaris fashion. It's a great vehicle if you're after the adrenaline rush.
The Polaris RZR XP1000, $27,995. There's also a 4-seater available. To find out more, go to polarisindustries.com.au. Well, it seems that everyone is in on the learn illegal market in Australia these days, even all the European manufacturers. Now, Triumph already had the basis of a good Lambs bike in its Street Triple 675. In Australia, you need to be 660cc or under and be within a certain power to weight ratio. So all Triumph had to do was reduce the stroke of the 3-cylinder engine, got it back to 660cc, mucked around with some of the camshaft design, played around with the ECU, and that's untamperable, and voila, they had a great learn legal bike. Now let's take a quick look at the sort of specification of this bike. bear in mind there's two normal street triple models you can get, the standard and the R. And the R has uprated suspension and brakes, where this one here's got unadjustable forks, Kayaba rear shock, or suspension's Kayaba both ends. It's adjustable for preload only. The instruments are pretty high tech really. It's the same as found on the bigger capacity street triple models. You get twin trip computers, you even get a lap timer. There's a whole heap of accessories too. You can get a nice screen, belly pan, and generally speaking it's been a pretty popular package in 675 form, and I'd see no reason why the 660 Lambs version is going to be any less popular. Now, even though it's a Lambs bike, I know you're wondering what sort of horsepower it's got. Well, it's got 55, which is 40.6 kilowatts. So it just scrapes under the 150 kilowatt per tonne ratio that's needed for a Lambs bike in Australia. Now, I've done plenty of miles on the Street Triple 675, and to be honest with you, I'm a big fan of the bike. What's this like compared to that? Well, it uses the same platform, so it does stop and handle as good as the 675. Of course, it's got the less horsepower, but really down the bottom and even mid-range, it feels still pretty strong. It's really only to the top end that you'll notice a major difference between the two. It's one of the, I guess, the more powerful learner legal bikes out there, and service intervals are 10,000 kilometres, which is pretty good these days. It's got plenty of space for a guy my size, 6 foot, and you know, carrying a few pounds, to feel comfortable on. The suspension is a little bit firm in the rear end, but you can play around with a preload there, so that's okay. It's a sort of bike really that you don't necessarily have to sell it and update to something bigger just because you've got your full license. I think a lot of people would be very happy to own this bike well after they've got rid of their learner's permit or the provisional license. Now, the fuel tank is just a shade over 17 litres in capacity, and surprisingly the fuel economy is not really any different to a 675. Now, I think that is partly down to the fact that you tend to be probably revving this bike a little bit harder when you're in attack mode, but that's what I can put it down to. That gives you around about 300 kilometres out of a tank, which is pretty good. And the thing about it, when you do want to twist the throttle, the sound is no different than the 675. It's got that beautiful Banshee wail out of the 3-cylinder inline engine, and the engine really is a gem. You know, there's not a lot to fault on this bike. Overall, it's a really, really good package, and it's $12,490 plus on-road cost. Now, to me, that's a bargain. So, Nige, the viewers now know what I think of this bike, which I'm pretty impressed by it. But what do you think of it? You spent some time on it, took it away for a weekend. What do you think of the bike?
I think it's a great bike. Like, sure, it's learner approved, but with 55 horsepower, it's not a slouch by any means. It gets up to the speed limit, cruises on the freeway at highway speeds with no drama at all. So, given that Lambs bikes hold their value really well, because there's always learners coming through that are looking for something second hand, I think anybody buying a new one today is going to get good value out of it. I especially like things like the way it steers and the way it stops. It's got the ABS brakes as standard, and that gives you a lot of confidence, especially in the wet. You add in a 24-month warranty, so you know you're going to get good reliability for the first 2 years. They cover it completely, and it adds up to a really good package.
So there you go. We've had a few people ride this bike, from old guys like us to some young riders off their provisional licence straight onto their blacks. So they're inexperienced in a way, and everyone's loved it. They all think it's a great package, so check one out at your local Triumph dealer.
You might be old, but I'm not. The Triumph Street Triple 660 is available now from Triumph dealers across Australia. Get more information from www.triumphmotorcycles.com.au.
Fearless innovation starts with an attitude. While others claim to be ahead of the curve, we're already leaning into the next one. We're about setting the precedent year after year and letting the rest play catch up. They ride to keep up with today. We ride to own tomorrow.
The lowrider is back and rides even lower.
Come down to On Two Wheels Motorsports, Sydney's best motorcycle shop and a proud sponsor of Cycle Talk TV, with a huge range of new Yamaha and Kawasaki motorcycles and ATVs, as well as a huge range of spares and all the accessories you're likely to need. On Two Wheels can help get you into the right bike at the right price with the right accessories and the right advice. On Two Wheels Motorsports, 304 Queen Street, Campbelltown. Find us online on social media or call us on 024625 7518.
Now this is the 1950 Model 18S AJS. Now this bike was built by Associated Motorcycles based in London, and the bike pretty much is very similar to the matchless G80 of the same period. Now this was the first and only year that the Model 18 got the candlestick rear suspension and the swing arm. Now the 18 stands for 500cc and the S stands for swing arm. 1949 model was rigid, but some of the later 49 models also got the candlestick suspension. Now, amazingly, this model ran from 1945 to 66 in pretty much similar condition to what you see now. You know, a few changes here and there. Later models got better performance. They also had the alloy head, but essentially the bike was a working man's bike. It was achievable financially for a lot of tradesmen. It was reliable, seen as very reliable, and this is a sort of bike you would have seen ridden by many workers to factories all around England of that period. Now I think you'll agree this bike is as pretty as a picture, but of course wasn't always this way. A good friend of mine, Dale Woods, owns this bike, and he bought it as a young fella back in 1988. He bought it off the original owner, and you might remember I talked about the bike being, you know, financially achievable for a lot of workers, tradesmen, and the guy that bought this brand new, that's exactly what he was, and he rode it to work every day. And the last time he rode it around, before he pulled it off the road, was 1972. And this bike has even got that last registration label in the glass case, and you'll see it on the side of the bike. Now, the bike then sort of was pulled apart by the original owner, probably to restore, never got around to it. And along comes my mate Dale to buy it. And it sat around sort of pushed from pillar to post for many years, half a dozen failed marriages, you know, probably a dozen houses. And finally, Dale got off his backside to put together 3 groups, I guess, or 3 individuals even, to finish this bike to the standard that it is now. And the paintwork was done by Randall Smash here in Maitland, and they've done a fantastic job, all 5 finished. The engine was built by Tony Fitzpatrick, who is very well known in the local motorcycle scene. And it was finally all put together by Gordon Hellier. And Gordon's sadly no longer with us, but the guy was just an absolute legend in the motorcycle scene around the Hunter Valley. A former Australian dirt track sidecar champion. And what he couldn't do on a motorcycle wasn't worth talking about really, you know, whether it be riding or actually rebuilding them. The guy was working well into his 80s, and this was one of the last jobs he really did. Now check out the beautifully restored Smith speedometer. You'll see there it's got a white line at the 30 miles per hour mark, and that was the speed limit of Greater London area back in the day. And a lot of these Smith speedometers on a whole load of English bikes had that feature. Now, going back to the paintwork, look at the front number plate and also the pinstriping on the tank. Now, the quality of that is just unbelievable. Done by Jim Nisbet. The tank itself, the AJS transfer in the middle of the tank there is as it was done back in the day. But also back in the day, the pinstriping was hand laid by craftsmen, and Jim has done an amazing job here, hand laid it all himself, and really it's some of the best work I've ever seen. Well, time to take this bike for a spin. Now back in the day, it had low compression pistons so I could run on the pretty poor quality post-war Pool petrol. Now apparently that makes it an easy starter because I don't really want a repeat of the Vincent incident. So all I need to do is give it a little bit of love, bit of a tickle here and there, and apparently it should go first kick, so we'll see what happens. Bit of fuel, just advance it a little bit. A little bit of a tickle there. First go. This thing's pristine, don't want to get it too dirty. It's only got not even 80 miles on the clock since it's been fully rebuilt. Gearbox and clutch are just smooth as. There we go. The old hand signals. Well, I can tell you this bike is a dead set credit to the people that have put it together. I mean, it's no race bike, it's no AJS 7R, it's a bit of a plonker, but that's what it was built to do back in the day. This thing, the gearbox is just, it's absolutely beautiful. You know, it's an old cliche, hot knife through butter, but this is it, you know. It's got an alloy head, so it's a little bit different to this particular model. It should have had a cast iron head, but it's got the later one on. Not that it really makes much difference, but the bike itself is just, everything's just right, which is you know, really nice to use a bike like this when it's in that sort of condition. You got to think that this bike's nearly 65 years old, and it's sort of coming up for retirement. But now that this has been put back together to its better than its former glory, it's just got so many years left in it, and I reckon it's just a bike you'd really like to enjoy, use it weekly, whatever. Just get on there and ride it, and it's a delight.
Everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. What separates some of us, though, is what we throw a leg over after our pants are on. The new Harley-Davidson Breakout motorcycle. Breakout.
Cycle Talk just doesn't do a TV show, we do a magazine as well. Every month you'll find tests, features, lots of info. Find us in bike shops or online. You can get back issues, www.cycletalk.com.au, iPad, iPhone, we're everywhere. Coolant plays a huge part in engine reliability, but any water-based coolant always has inherent problems. Now, John Marlier from Evans Waterless Coolant is here to tell us why his products will offer you a much greater benefit than the conventional type of coolants. So, John, can you give us a bit of a more detailed explanation as to how your products do the things that you say they will?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, historically, engine coolant's been a mixture of water and glycol, generally a 50-50 mix with the addition of corrosion inhibitors.
Okay.
And that's been used for many years in all types of engines. But as you know, Chris, having water in the cooling system has created some issues.
Yep.
And generally, engines have to work within that limitation of water, which means that as engines are operating on a very fine line. Okay, so most engines operate in the vicinity of 85 to 95 degrees Celsius,
okay,
which means they're very close to the boiling point of water.
Okay.
With Evans waterless engine coolants, our coolants have been formulated in a way where they don't need to be diluted with water.
Okay.
And that means that by removing the water content altogether, we eliminate corrosion.
Yep.
We have a boiling point of 190 degrees Celsius down to minus 40. We eliminate vapor pressure because our coolants don't evaporate. Also means you don't have to top up your coolant. And best of all, our coolant lasts the lifetime of the engine.
So you don't have to replace it?
You don't have to replace it. You don't have to replace it. So as long as it's been installed correctly,
right,
it's got under 3% water content, you can basically use our coolant for the lifetime of the engine,
okay,
whether it's being stored or whether it's being used as an everyday drive.
Now, with normal coolants, it's got additives in it, of course. Now, after a period of time, they don't have any benefits, do they?
No, that's right. But typically, a normal coolant needs to be constantly circulated throughout the engine regularly to ensure that the coolant is doing its job and stays intact. Generally, what happens is if an engine is stored for a time period, those additives separate from the coolant. The glycol separates from the water.
Okay.
Everything separates, which means then effectively you don't have a coolant in your engine anymore. Evans coolants stay stable. All the additives are suspended within the solution at all times,
okay,
and doesn't need constant circulation.
An area where you might not think that this sort of modern technology, this sort of coolant would be a huge benefit is in the classic sort of motorcycle scene. And not all classic motorcycles have liquid cooled engines, but more modern classics do, like our 1992 851 Ducati. And it's a sort of bike that we don't ride very, very often. And we know that the regular water-based coolants do deteriorate. And what we're going to do is change the coolant that's in it, which has been sitting for 18 months or so, maybe even more, to the Power Sports coolant. And hopefully then, unless there's any leaks, we'll never have to change it again. And the coolant we know is going to remain constant, and it's going to be a great benefit to the engine because these bikes are sort of known for a little bit of corrosion, and that's one thing we don't want. Now, John, what's the cost equation with converting to your products?
Obviously, we're more expensive than conventional coolants. It's hard to be cheaper when your competition's water.
Yep.
But you get a bottle of Power Sports coolant in the vicinity of $50.
Okay.
But keeping in mind, obviously, it's a once-off fill. Hopefully, the last coolant change will do on your bike. Plus, obviously preserving parts and that sort of thing by eliminating corrosion. So it's pretty good value when you come to think of it.
Okay, and where can people buy it?
At the moment, we've got in the vicinity of 40 dealers throughout Australia and New Zealand, and we've got a lot of ground to cover yet. But you can go to our website, which is www.evanscoolants.com.au to find the addresses of and details of all our dealers and installers.
Evans Coolants are suitable for all types of vehicles. You can get more information from www.evanscoolants.com.au or you can call 03 9318 9811. My product pick of the week is the Contour Plus 2 action camera. This is what it looks like. It's very low profile when it's mounted on a helmet or pointing in the direction that you want to shoot. So it punches through the air much better than some of the big boxy square cameras you can get. Now this is the Contour Plus 2. It's the top of the range Contour, and it's got all the bells and whistles that you expect in a modern high-end camera. So Bluetooth rather than Wi-Fi. Bluetooth is really good. You pair it up to a smartphone and you can see the picture that you're going to get before you start shooting. The mounts are really innovative and really cool. There's stick-on ones, there are rotating mounts, there's rubber strap-on mounts, there's helmet mounts, there's all sorts of things, suction caps. You can get all sorts of different mounts, which is really good for getting it onto a bike or getting it onto a helmet. So you can get it just about anywhere you want. And generally, compared to some of the other cameras, they use a lot lower profile mount, so it's much closer to what you're mounting it to, so there's a lot less vibration and shake, which is really transmitted to these cameras when you use them in the field on bikes. So it's also got a rotating front lens element, so that if you have to mount it at an angle, you can just rotate the front lens back to horizontal and get it right. It's even got a laser pointer built into it, so you can just use that to line it up if you don't have the Bluetooth set up on your smartphone. It's also got a microphone socket if you want to run a microphone down to your engine to get engine noises, or up to your helmet so you can talk into it, you can. It's also got multiple settings that you can just, at a flick of a switch, go from photos to video, back again if you want to do it that way as well. Records it all to a micro SD card at 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second, and the image quality is pretty good too. We're really happy with the Contour Plus 2. It comes with a complete waterproof case if you want to take it swimming or take it into some water sports like skiing, things like that. But for motorbike riding, you just use it as it is like this and you'll get some great results. Check them out through your local bike shop, $499 recommended retail, and you'll get a lot of great action footage from a Contour Plus 2. The Contour Plus 2 also has GPS navigation, so you can use it with the free software on your computer to track where you've been. These are available at bike shops everywhere. Go to motonational.com.au for stockists and more information.